House is a really weird movie. It's surreal, it changes genre at the drop of a hat, it's very dreamlike, has no real logic or sense of direction at times. It's just bizarre. And that's exactly why I love it. A shining piece of comedy horror, bizarro surrealism, House, or Houseu as it's often referred to as, is this interesting little film, to say the least. It's only gotten bigger as time's gone on. Anyone who's dove into the Japanese art cinema scene recognizes this movie from the cover alone. But more than anything, House is recognizable for the elements that were put into the film by director Nobuhiko Obayashi. And with his recent passing, I figured it'd be a good enough time as any to discuss his most iconic work to date. Let's dive into this. House began off with one simple request from the head of Toho Films. Make a Japanese horror film that'd be the success equivalent to Jaws. You know, Jaws, first ever blockbuster, film that changed cinema forever. Yeah, just do that, man. Can't be too hard. Needless to say, this required some out-of-the-box thinking. So instead of going in blind, he decided he wanted the purest, most imaginative view he could get. That of his own daughter. He asked her what she was afraid of and compiled the ideas and developed it into a story with screenwriter Chiho Katsura, and eventually they had the script.
鏡に向かって長い髪をこう櫛で削りながら、パパこの鏡に映った私が襲ってきたら怖いよ。これはなるほど不思議だ面白い。アリやネズミやクマが人間を襲っても普通だけど、鏡に映った私が私を襲ってくるというのは、これは映画でしかありえないファンタジーだと。とても面白い。不思議の国のアリスのような。
But see, here's where the problem comes in. Nobody wanted to make it. People thought it would kill their career. Nobody had any hope in it except for the studio behind it because they needed this Jaws-like movie, and Nobuhiko himself. So in the end they decided, why don't we just go to Nobuhiko? Now talking about this movie is a lot more complicated than just saying it's weird and moving on. There's a method to the madness here. Like the effects being purposefully childlike to evoke this sort of immature nightmare sort of feeling, and how a lot of the more goofy elements sort of correspond with that. It has a sort of self-awareness to the horror that makes it gleeful and addicting. Even the score itself has a bit of simplicity to it, with this repeating melody that appears over and over again to an almost maddening degree. There's a sort of childlike wonder to it all, like you're seeing the world through the eyes of a child. And this child is seeing some shit, that's for sure. Because, well, besides the obvious horror elements to it, there's a real theme of death and grief here. And we're going to talk about that today. Now, I know the idea of a film this goofy being about grief as compared to, say, more somber works like The Babadook and Hereditary seems a bit odd. But I think there's much more to this. After all, death kinda comes up a lot here. See, the biggest catalyst of the entire story is that our protagonist, Gorgeous, refuses to accept her father's new partner, as she's still grieving her mother, rejecting both her new stepmom and her father in the process. Because of her newfound hatred for her father's actions, instead of going on a trip with him, she decides to rebel and visit her mother's sister instead to regain touch with her mother's past. And it's at this house, and because of the decision to go there by Gorgeous, that her and her friends meet their doom. See, as each student reaches their gruesome, bizarre end at the aunt's house, a thought comes to mind. Is this all Gorgeous's fault? Is this all because of her decision to visit this house? After all, they'd all be safe if it weren't for her rebellion. In that sense, you could consider their deaths to be directly caused by Gorgeous's refusal to get over her grief. In a way, you can see the house as a sort of manifestation of Gorgeous's grief, a sort of memory of a memory of her mother. But by chasing after that memory of a memory, she loses all the people in her life that were there for her in the present. And they just become consumed by this over-encompassing grief of it all. She misses her mother. She wants to relive the past. But in that, she loses the present, and she destroys the people in her life that want to be a part of that present. And that's all with getting into the character of her aunt, who, well, let's just say, is even deeper than she is. See, towards the end of the film, we finally get the motive for the house's attack. The aunt's own grief. See, the aunt was actually set to get married to her fiancé once he returned from World War II. But he never returned. She died waiting for him to arrive, with her spirit living on in the house, which has since sought to lure in and sustain itself on unmarried young girls as punishment for her having to stay that way herself. So in a much more literal sense, they are all consumed by grief, but it's the aunts. While in a much more metaphorical sense, it's the grief of Gorgeous herself that leads them to get there. It's because of her that they are in that situation, in her chasing of a memory, that they're all there. As a result, they all reach their end because no one was able to get over their own grief. And in that way, the aunt's grief can be seen as Gorgeous is taken to its very most extreme. Where instead of just destroying the present, it destroys the future. It just poisons the well for everyone around her, until it consumes every single person that represents every part of her that she didn't get to live. And none of this was accidental. Obayashi's own history of grief is present in the entire film as well. In August 1945, the United States, with the permission of the United Kingdom and Canada, dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, resulting in a total death count of over 100,000 people. Vast majority being civilians not engaged in combat. To this day, it remains one of the most controversial and ethically abhorrent acts of war crime ever permitted by the United States of America, and the ramifications still shake Japan to this day. And I bring this up because Obayashi grew up in Hiroshima, and has stated that he lost all of his childhood friends in the blast.
僕の親しい同年配の子供たちはみんな原爆で死んでますから、やっぱり原爆というテーマでね、このファンタジーを。
In a sense, this entire film is a way of portraying his own grief and his own sense of hatred towards the world that he had at that moment, and how it could have consumed him in the end if it weren't for the fact that he was able to manage it and hold himself back. How Japan as a country still had yet to recover from those blasts, and the anger that was underneath them that they were hiding in between. You can see that in Gorgeous and the aunt's storylines. Early on in the film, we see a flashback of the aunt's backstory, and it ends with an important detail. The images of an H-bomb going off with the simple words, "It's like cotton candy," being spoken. A childish interpretation of true horror and grief. And in a way, it makes sense that the movie is both terrifying and absurd. Grief itself is terrifying and absurd. It makes no sense to think about death at all, yet we let it torture us when someone dies until we go insane. In a lot of ways, the only way to move on is to deal with it with childish simplicity. To accept it, move on, to look back and see cotton candy. I love this weird little film. It's terrifying, it's funny, it's sharp-witted, it's weirdly edited, it's all over the place, and yet it's all compact to its own little experience. It's beautiful. And it's Nobuhiko Obayashi's own vision. And that's what makes it so special. Rest in peace. I'd like to give a special thanks to my $10 patrons on Patreon: Cameron Kanaki, Beatrice DeCecco, Aerith, Paige, Mia Mulder, and Jonathan Palacio.